Oh, there we go. So we're all at different stages of this. I'm kind of bringing it from we're all learning, and some are starting off, some are putting a lot of these things in practice already. The recording is actually available after the session today, so definitely do feel free to share it to people, and I'll send that out in the morning. So I think both of you know me already, but my pronouns are she, her, and I am a diversity. So I'm white, Irish, I'm Catholic, I'm not disabled, I'm middle class, and I am a single mother to a mixed race boy. And that is kind of why I do the work that I do. Hi there, welcome along. Whoever has just joined, I've just let you in. We are recording now, and if there's time, I'll turn it off for questions at the end. So I am the founder of Still I Rise Diversity Storytelling. I grew up in Belfast in Northern Ireland. I kind of grew up during the Troubles, what they're known as now, and it was just very much white society where there really was just two religions, Catholic, Protestant. So we're kind of in the hangover of that as society's changing, as we're developing, like a lot of places, our curriculum isn't very integrated for where we are as a society. So I set up Still I Rise, having had a mixed race son, and the first thing I noticed was a lack of representation in children's books and learning resources, a lack of characters and heroes that look like him, and families that look like ours as well. So I became, I suppose, motivated by that awakening nearly, and fascinated by the impact that would have on all underrepresented and marginalized groups. So I actually love this slide, but it's saying, well, yeah, it's great. So I started off with the TEDx Stormont, and then on the back of that, people asked for book lists, and then we set up Still I Rise Diversity Storytelling. When lockdown happened, we brought it online and developed workshops and learning through story sessions. We've also developed workshops to listen to different children's experiences and hear their voices and write stories as well. And now we're actually moving into quite a lot of training for schools, for educators, and for businesses as well. And I've also won quite some awards, which is why I actually love this slide and find it a bit cringe, but we move. Nice to share. So today, just for these sessions, I do think it's handy to record because I do think that it's handy to go back to them. I know that we'll be having these conversations for most of our lives, unfortunately. It's hard to know the right thing. Handy to share whenever something comes up, potentially in the home, in schools, even in businesses as well. This is a difficult topic to talk about. I only know it because I have a black son who went through different bits and pieces through his primary school, from learning through that and doing various pieces of anti-racism training and bits and pieces of training as well, and also being parts of communities. So it's very much not name and shame, it's not guilting, it's in here together. It is nurturing a culture of learning. It's questioning our own biases and our own assumptions that we have, and I do believe that we all carry that racism and those assumptions and those biases with us. And welcome and accountability as well. If there's anything that I share today that you want to challenge, absolutely do. You can do it at the end in questions. You can email me separately. More than happy for 15-minute calls as well. Happy for discovery calls or one-to-ones like that. And then it is kind of encouraging curiosity and compassion. So nearly planting those seeds. I do have some resources to share with you today. If you want any more information on those as well, please get in touch. So our objectives today, and with all these series, I do offer these webinars last Thursday of every month. It's increasing awareness. It's encouraging. It's nearly taking the time for self-reflection. And I've been doing this for a number of years, and I love these sessions because it gives me the opportunity as well to reflect on learning and unlearning and how I can do better too. And hopefully providing some practical strategies and empowering each other to take action. So the 3 tips, I just find it kind of easy to have 3 key things that we can explore with these topics. And my 3 today for this one, for talking to children about race, is starting early and keeping it ongoing, being honest and clear, and modelling inclusivity and allyship or advocacy. So we'll kind of start off with facts. Some of you will know this already. Welcome to the people who have already joined. I'll just reiterate that we are recording this session. If there is time for questions and answers, I'll turn off the recording and it's available for you to watch on our YouTube from tomorrow morning. So this is the situation across the UK. I know some people are logging on from the south of Ireland, but we're kind of focusing on the UK for this session. So 95% of young Black children in the UK have heard or witnessed racist language at school. 47% of racialized children live in poverty compared to 24% of white children. So that kind of is exploring the intersectionality of it. UK school recorders recorded more than 60,000 racist incidents in 5 years, and they're reported ones. And Black Caribbean girls are twice as likely to be excluded than their white peers. And oh, sorry, 1 second. I have lost my screen. Sorry. I think you can see I've gone out of my there. 1 second, maybe you can see it actually. And 1 in 4 teachers said that they lack confidence and ability to develop their understanding of Black history and cultural diversity, with a calling for specialised in-school training to help address this. So I'm based in Belfast. I know that in the north of Ireland, unfortunately, it's very, very similar stats. I know that there are 8 reported race-related hate crimes in the north of Ireland. More than half of them are in Belfast, and schools just don't really know how to cope, and it is systemic issues here, so we all need to know better. And so it is kind of stepping in and developing that confidence and ability to be able to deeper understand where we're at. Racism is a safeguarding issue. I think someone has, if you wouldn't mind all keeping your mute on, that would be really helpful, because there's quite a lot of there was some background noise there. Thank you so much. So race is a protected characteristic in law under the Equality Act of 2010. So we have a legal obligation to work within an equitable framework as per the Children's Act 1989 and the Equality Act of 2010. So it really is a responsibility, but also a requirement. And it also is their responsibility to keep children psychologically safe in schools and to protect children from systemic and structural harms. So it is, whenever it's not supported, whenever we don't dig deeper, it is really looking at our safeguarding. So apart from ethical reasons, why should race be an issue? Why should we be talking about race? Why does it matter? When we are talking about all different identities, experiences, histories, perspective even, it promotes better mental health across the board. It does foster deeper relationships. It acknowledges all people. So it is really promoting equity within learning spaces, and it is encouraging understanding and acceptance, and it is sensitive to differences while promoting equality as well. And there was a very interesting study done by Harvard on the health impact of racism and racial trauma, and these were some of the things that came up. Having had a son who's now preteen, he's now 12 years old. I have his permission to talk about his experiences here. These things came up. He had a tricky time in primary school. He's now in post-primary, and his issues were really a lot of these issues that they're kind of showing here. So there was hypervigilance, chronic stress, really anger response, various behavioral problems, low self-esteem, emotional distress, depression and anxiety, a higher risk of self-harm, and poor focus. So all of these things, and I think there are teachers within this group, it's very easy nearly as parents, as adults, as teachers, to put it somewhere else, to blame something else on these behaviours. But actually, whenever we know better about race and racism and racial trauma, we can kind of pinpoint the source of the problem and nearly support from there. So number one, starting early and keeping it going. So why does it matter? So children notice race early. Research shows that children as young as 6 months old can notice racial differences, and as young as 2 to 4 years old, they start to show bias. When we are silent about these things, right from newborn, right from toddler stage, and if we avoid conversations about race, children may internalize that race is a taboo subject, or we can't talk about it, or it is uncomfortable, or we should avoid it. So just keeping that in mind as well. And then it just builds awareness. So it is really talking about race regularly, really embedding it in our conversations and being comfortable with talking about it in the home, in society, with our friends, with our peers, with our colleagues, and in learning spaces, if that's where we are, if that's where we're working as well. Helps children to develop that empathy, fairness, and an understanding of diversity as well from a young age. So some practical strategies for this. Use in everyday moments. So it really shouldn't be a one-off. It needs to be ongoing. And I would really encourage, this is talking to children about race, but I really would encourage the conversations with family and with friends as well. And even if you're a member of the PTA group, or you have various mum groups as well, just sharing articles or kind of starting the conversation as well. It can be whenever you're watching a show. It can be when you're reading a book. It can be when you see maybe an unfair assumption or an unfair stereotype. It's a really good opportunity to have that child appropriate conversation. Children will often, especially young children, will often point out a different skin color, or they'll talk about a friend or a person in their class with a different skin color. And that's a really good opportunity to talk about our differences and to kind of start the conversation that not all of us have the same skin color, and start that conversation as well. And reflect reality. So really choose, and I think we're all kind of aware of this now, choosing books and media that not only reflect diversity, but reflect it quite accurately. So introduce books, try and normalize having books that have lots of different identities, races, cultures, traditions, ethnicities, and just kind of build it from there as well. And once you kind of see it, you can't unsee it. So it is just kind of committing to that as well. And again, if you're in a learning space, inclusive months, inclusive weeks, inclusive days are fantastic, but use those as a foundation to step up your learning throughout the year. So a really, really good one that I use is My Skin, Your Skin, and that is by Laura Henry Allen. And that's normalizing, that's talking about race and normalizing the conversation about race and racism. I use this with adults, I use this with post-primary as well. So that is one I would highly recommend. And then normalize differences in a really positive way. So whenever we were growing up in Ireland, we were, I suppose, the representation of Black people was like the Black babies in Africa. They were poor, they were starving, there was trauma, we had to help them, we had to be saviors. That's not real life. So it's normalizing it about and amplifying authentic Black voices and moving away from that stereotype that comes with it. And whenever children do notice race or notice differences, really affirm their curiosity. So really encourage more questions. And if they ask you something and you don't know the answer, just say that you don't know either. If a child says that someone's hair looks different, really good opportunity to start talking about Afro hair. Great books out there, which I can recommend. After there's one called Hair Love, which is actually a banned book in the States, but it's a really beautiful story about a Black father really caring for and nurturing for his daughter and looking after her Afro hair. So really commend them nearly on making a brilliant observation. Lots of people have different hair types, different hair colors, and different textures, and just kind of start it from there. So talking about race, it should be frequent and natural and not reserved for moments of crisis, and not nearly panic talking about it. And the goal really is creating that trusted space where children feel like they can ask questions and express their thoughts without being shut down. Starting early, continuing that conversation over time, and helping children develop racial literacy and compassion. So a couple of facts just about talking about race. So some people quite naturally, I think, are afraid of talking too young because they don't want to make their child be aware of racism too early. But the facts kind of are that from 3 months old, babies are making preference to faces from certain racial groups. Children as young as 2 can use race to reason certain behaviours. And at 4 to 5, expressions of prejudice can peak. And then from age 5, Black and brown children can show no preference to their own race, while white children remain biased towards their own race. And then by starting school, so 5 plus, many children are already associating whiteness with greater wealth and status. But then at 5 to 7 years old, explicit conversations with children about interracial friendships, about race, about identity, about racism can improve their attitudes in as little as a week. So for some, it is quite shocking to read that, but it really is an affirmation that we need to be starting the conversations early. So there are various ways of age-appropriate ways of talking to your children about race. I will fire through this. Again, any other questions, do get in touch after. Really expose to diversity, have picture board books from newborn, have different things, art maybe in your house, pictures in the house, what you watch, just normalize the racial diversity that exists in the world. Model inclusive behavior. Babies, toddlers, primary school ages, and especially babies are always watching and always listening as well, and starting off that positive reinforcement as a parent at home or as an educator. And then for toddlers and preschoolers, really use this stage to start talking about differences and similarities in a really positive way, using everyday examples across the classroom, in the house, in things that we watch, and using books and resources. And I did talk about books there in terms of in the house. Also, if you're a teacher and educator in the learning space, so how inclusive are your pictures on the wall? is there a hair corner in your learning space? Is there Afro hair? Is there Afro hair products? Are there different cultures? Different things like that to normalize the conversation and destigmatize negative connotations with race. Then older primary school, this is a really good time to start talking about fairness and justice. The world isn't fair, but how does it show up and what can we do about it? And really encouraging that curiosity and those conversations to keep going. And think about role models as well. So I think this can kind of focus on family, but it can be your community as well. So for me, raising a mixed race boy, none of my family are Black. His dad's in a different country. So it was really kind of looking at communities that we had access to, that we could go to. So he had role models that looked like him, really positive role models. And yes, it does take effort, and it's not a case of tokenizing people in your community, but it is making that effort to create authentic and build authentic friendships and build those role models. Preteen is a really interesting one. I think there's a lot of intersectionality at the moment as well with misogyny and race. And I think this is a really good age to have the deeper conversations. So go for walks, maybe if you have children who are preteen, if you have nieces or nephews or people in the community, really encourage action as well. This is the age where we can talk about being an active bystander, what that looks like, dig deeper in justice and unfairness as well, and challenge media messages. What are we hearing on the news? If the news is on the radio, what are headlines looking like? And really use that to encourage conversations about how messages are given in the world as well. Then teenager from 13 years plus, encourage those complex discussions, really encourage that curiosity. This is the time whenever we can really empower our teams in our communities and motivate them nearly to take those difficult actions. So the second tip was being honest and clear. So why it matters, young children, right up from toddlers, recognize unfairness, and they benefit from clear, honest explanations without shutting it down. Just being like, if we don't know the answer, we just don't know, and it's not fair, and that's the way it is. Or, being as honest as we can with them. And really being as clear as possible with it, and choosing words and choosing language that isn't vague, so that we're avoiding confusion and we're avoiding misinterpretation of the message. And I think a lot of people think that color blindness is good. I respect all people. I don't see color. We're all the same. And it's just really not good enough, because it erases the realities of race and racism. Instead, being clear and direct really encourages children to dig a little bit deeper and understand what race is and how to navigate it when it does show up. So practical strategies can include being mindful of language. So this can be using terms like race, saying racism, saying Black, talking about bias. Children are capable of understanding these concepts from a young age when they're explained in really simple and concise ways. And it can be really, and actually Laura touches on it in this book, where it's, people are treated unfairly because of the color of their skin, and it's always existed and it still existed. It's wrong, it's bullying, and it's not fair. For older children, we could talk about how some people have privileges, they have advantages. It can be because of their race, it can be because of other things, while other people face challenges. And it's very much that it's not a bad thing or a good thing, it's how it is, but how we react, what our action is, and how it shows up is key here. This is a really good book, Race Cars, and this is all about white privilege, but it's described in a really helpful, child-appropriate way, really good to start conversations, a very, very engaging book as well. I did this in a session with primary school children. At the end of the day, they were very engaged in it, and we could have actually stayed on and talked about it, but it's all about a Black race car and a white race car and barriers that are set up for them. Then the acknowledgement of the realities of racism. Again, be really honest that racism exists, avoid sugarcoating it or dismissing it as a thing of the past, and just kind of encouraging children to recognize the harm of racism. We don't need to go into great detail, but sharing that in child appropriate and concise language. Then again, with the power of kindness, the power of allyship and advocacy. And again, when children ask, as they will, why was that child treated unfairly? You can just explain, like, sometimes people are treated unfairly because of the color of their skin, because of what they look like, and that's racism, and that's wrong, and it's important that we do something about it. We can use resources. So again, like the books that we were sharing here, with just really straightforward language about the topics, the difficult topics to talk about. This book is also great. I'm sure some of you are aware of this. It's called The Proudest Blue. And this is where the main character faces unkindness due to her hijab. Again, this is a nice conversation starter for identity and discrimination as well. And again, it's just, how do you think that would feel? What could we do if that was our friend? How could we make someone feel welcome in our classroom if that happened? So when we're talking to children about race, be really clear, not vague, use direct, honest language, name the issue, call racism what it is, and empower the truth. So have those honest conversations to build children's confidence to recognise and challenge unfairness. And number 3, model inclusivity and allyship. This is probably one of the hardest things, I think, looking at ourselves. So children do learn from us. So everything we say, it's a lot of pressure on us. Everything we say, every expression, every way we move, everything that we react to is telling them something. So how can we really model acceptance and action and curiosity? So just pay attention nearly to, we did do an inclusive language session a couple of months ago. So what does our language look like as well? How do we react if we see something in public? And again, what's showing up in schools and learning places and communities, and how are we reacting to it? And this can foster empathy, it can deeper understanding, and it can show them what that looks like in practice. And then modeling action. So allyship is really demonstrated through that action. When children can see us stand up to unfairness, they're learning how to do the same. And again, in our case, in our home and in our community, it was very much, my son had always associated things like rallies or calling things out with aggression, with anger, because that's what we're showing in the world around us, unfortunately, in the news and how things are reported. But actually, it can be just intervening in something and having a conversation and asking why, and just kind of being an active bystander. So it doesn't need to be negative or aggressive, but it's just kind of where it's a safe space, standing up and being an active bystander. So some practical strategies for this is demonstrating inclusive language and actions. So using really thoughtful, inclusive language in daily conversations. That's a journey. Our language changes, it evolves. There definitely is a lot of expressions and phrases in Northern Irish language, in our dialect up here, that has not aged well, is damaging, is exclusive. And it's just kind of being aware of that as we go. Promoting empathy and understanding by promoting different cultures, different traditions and identities in a really respectful way. That can be by going to different events, by going to different story sessions or different workshops in your community, in your towns, and just going with a curious and open mind nearly as well. Being really careful of microaggressions or assumptions in our own speech and correcting them when needed. And I think if you do have younger children or younger children in your setting, as they do get older, they will call that out, which is great to be held account. Ensuring toys, books and materials reflect diverse identities in the home, in school, in the classroom, and normalise that diversity throughout the year, not just whenever it is an inclusive month or an inclusive day. And teaching children to be active bystanders. This can be a really difficult one because it's hard enough for adults to be active bystanders. We can read about it and talk about it till the cows come home, and that's brilliant, but how do we do it in real life? And it can be just kind of explaining what it is. So it is just when someone is taking action, and it can be in a really, really respectful way. It can be speaking up. It can be just saying, that's not kind, please stop. It can be encouraging children to tell a trusted adult when that does happen. And it can be comforting the person affected, even if they feel unsure or uncomfortable doing it. And then being an active bystander. So this book is great for that. Speak Up by Nathan Bryan. And it's all about the power of community, the power of speaking up, how we can use our voices to make change in the world. So really modelling that inclusion daily, looking and being aware of our own words, of our own actions and choices, and how they shape how children see us and themselves and others, and encourage fairness. So encourage children to understand what fairness is and what it isn't, what's injustice, and how we can challenge that even in small pieces and empower children to become those active bystanders and use their voice for change. So the 3 tips, really quick one, is starting early and keeping the conversation ongoing, being honest and clear, and modeling inclusivity and allyship. And the key points here, talking to children about race. Don't stop talking about race ever. And even as adults, as keep going, staying calm and open and really encouraging that curiosity, being honest and age appropriate, admitting what we don't know, and really encouraging that empathetic approach and reinforcing positive values as we go on. So here are some books that I would recommend. For adults, I know that the ones who have come to previous workshops will be aware of some of these. Yeah, they'll be online tomorrow. Please do screen grab the page if you like. And yeah, I mean, this is where we are. If you'd like to join us,